Imagine staring down just a literal mountain of tedious, mind-numbing work. You know the exact kind of project I'm talking about here.
Oh, absolutely. The soul-crushing kind.
Right, the kind of assignment that usually swallows up like months of your life, drains all your creative energy, and just leaves you staring at a glowing screen at 2 in the morning until your eyes completely blur.
Yeah, the grunt work.
Exactly. The formatting, the bug fixing, the endless checking of variables. Now, I want you to imagine a scenario where you simply write a paragraph explaining what you want, you hand it off to an assistant, and suddenly 80% of that mountain has flattened,
Just gone.
fully completed in just a few days. So ask yourself right now, what would you actually do with all that freed up brain space? How would you redefine your day or, honestly, your career trajectory if that struggle was suddenly removed?
It's a massive question.
It really is. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're exploring a reality that has entirely left the realm of science fiction. We're stepping right into the messy, exhilarating, and sometimes existentially terrifying bleeding edge of artificial intelligence.
And we have an incredibly rich grounding source to guide us through this landscape today. We're breaking down a recent, deeply revealing interview with Tianze Tang.
Yeah, his story is fascinating.
It really is. He's a PhD candidate at the University of Vienna, operating right at this crazy collision point of artificial intelligence, computer science, and complex medical research.
Which is just a wild intersection to be sitting at right now.
It's the absolute frontier. And what makes his perspective so vital for anyone trying to navigate the modern economy is that he isn't a pundit. He's not just theorizing about the future from the sidelines.
Right, he's actually doing the work.
He's living in the absolute trenches of it right now. He's dealing with the daily friction of trying to make these massive AI models work in real life or death medical scenarios.
So the mission of this deep dive is to really extract Tang's hard-won insights on navigating this incredibly fast-paced new world. We're going to look at how he manages the genuinely chaotic reality of medical data, the art of mastering complex cross-disciplinary learning when the underlying tech just, well, it evolves by the minute.
Literally by the minute.
Yeah, and how you can apply his highly unconventional, almost ruthless strategies to your own professional life. Because his journey illustrates a fundamental, ground-up shift in how human beings are going to execute complex work from this point forward.
What's fascinating here is how this shifts our entire definition of productivity. I mean, for generations, we've lived in an era of execution scarcity.
Execution scarcity. Tell me more about that.
Well, ideas were cheap, right? But executing them, writing the code, running the experiments, doing the manual labor of knowledge work, that was incredibly expensive in terms of time and human capital.
Right.
But Tang's experience shows that we've rapidly crossed the threshold into an era of execution abundance. And when execution is suddenly abundant, it changes the fundamental nature of what it means to be an expert in any field whatsoever.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's anchor that abstract idea in the actual transition Tang himself experienced. Because he vividly describes the night and day difference between his undergraduate days and his current workflow as a PhD student.
It's night and day.
Let's look at the pre-AI versus the post-AI era of learning. Back in his undergrad, Tang says that if he wanted to research a new concept or build a piece of software, the friction was just, it was agonizing.
Oh man, hours and hours of just...
Yeah. He spent hours, sometimes entire weekends, just agonizing over the tiniest technical roadblocks. He talks about scouring platforms like CSDN, which is this massive developer community and forum, just hunting down obscure bugs.
We've all been there.
You're dealing with broken software dependencies, failing environmental setups, and just the kind of deeply frustrating invisible roadblocks that make you want to throw your entire computer out the window.
Anyone who's ever tried to learn a complex new software platform or, tried to teach themselves a coding language like Python or C++ is, that specific flavor of misery.
It is misery.
It's the friction of the medium. You aren't actually solving the grand problem you set out to solve. You're just fighting a war of attrition with the tools.
Looking for a missing semicolon.
Exactly. You're trying to figure out why a library from 2021 won't talk to a framework from 2023. But Tang points out a massive tectonic paradigm shift in his current day-to-day reality.
Right, the post-AI workflow.
In the post-AI era, his workflow has completely and utterly transformed. He no longer starts a project by opening a blank document and writing code from scratch. Instead, he provides an outline.
He acts almost like an architect handing a rough sketch to a foreman, right?
That's a great way to put it. He simply tells the AI the overarching architecture of what he wants to research or the specific parameters of the tool he wants to build.
So he feeds it a syllabus, essentially. He gives it an outline of his goal, and the AI goes to work and fills in 70 to 80% of the technical details.
Just instantly.
It handles all that tedious boilerplate work, the basic data collection pipelines, the standard technical specs, and Tang is then left to do the final 20%.
The tweaking.
Exactly. The highly nuanced refinement, the actual high-level intellectual work that requires a human touch. He's gone from being a scavenger, hunting for syntax errors in the mud, to being a director, guiding this highly capable, infinitely patient production team. But I got to play devil's advocate here for a second, because Tang admits that this extreme efficiency actually triggered an existential crisis for him.
Yes.
And I think that makes total sense. If you hand off all the foundational work to a machine, aren't you losing the fundamental building blocks of your expertise?
That is the exact psychological trap that Tang had to navigate. And it's a crisis that I suspect you, listening to this right now, might be feeling or will soon feel in your own industry.
It's terrifying.
Tang articulated the dread perfectly. He said, if a complex research task that historically took you 6 months of grueling effort to complete can now be done by a sophisticated AI in just 2 weeks, what happens to you?
What's your value?
Exactly. What is your value to the market or to your university or your employer? We are deeply societally conditioned to equate our professional worth with the amount of time and physical or mental suffering we put into a task.
If it's hard, it's valuable.
Right. The harder it is, the more valuable we feel. When an AI can do in half a day what used to take you half a month, it creates this massive vacuum of purpose. It is a heavy, heavy psychological weight.
Because if the struggle is removed, we feel obsolete. We feel like frauds. But Tang didn't spiral into that panic for long, did he?
No, he reframed it completely.
He views this exact situation not as an impending obsolescence, but as a massive, unprecedented liberation. He tells us that this extreme efficiency is actually the greatest gift a knowledge worker could ask for, because it violently strips away the grunt work.
It's liberating.
It allows researchers, and by extension, anyone doing complex work, to focus entirely on the high-level design, the overarching project management, and the creative conceptual aspects of the work that they actually enjoy doing.
You're no longer bogged down in the mud trying to dig the foundation. You're standing on a hill looking at the entire map of the city you're trying to build.
Yes.
And taking that a step further, this represents the death of line-by-line coding as the primary, most highly prized skill of a computer scientist.
The death of coding. That's a huge statement.
It is, but Tang specifically points to the incredible compounding capabilities of models like GPT-4, Codex, and Claude Opus. He notes that the vital skill in his highly technical field has fundamentally, permanently shifted.
Shifted how?
The premium is no longer on the ability to write the code. The essential high-value skill now is the ability to review the code.
Okay, let's break down what that actual workflow looks like now. Tang explains that to be effective on the bleeding edge, you simply don't need to write every single line.
You'd be wasting your time.
Right. You just need to have a bulletproof understanding of the underlying logic. So you ask the AI to generate the code for a specific function. Then you ask the AI to write a simple test for the code it just generated.
And then you step in as the supervisor.
Exactly. You run the test. You meticulously check the inputs. You check the outputs. You verify the intermediate variables to make sure the logic holds up at every single step of the process. You are auditing the machine's thought process.
Coding is becoming less about memorizing syntax, punctuation, and specific library commands, and almost entirely about architectural intuition.
Architectural intuition, I like that.
Think of it like being the editor-in-chief of a major newspaper rather than a junior investigative reporter.
Okay, walk me through that.
The editor-in-chief doesn't need to go out into the rain, knock on doors, and write the rough first draft of the article. The AI is the junior reporter doing that legwork.
Makes sense.
But the editor-in-chief absolutely must have the refined taste, the decades of experience, and the razor-sharp critical eye to know if the story actually makes sense.
Do the facts align?
Right. Does the narrative flow? Are the sources credible? If you lack the ability to read and deeply understand the flow of logic, an AI might generate thousands of lines of code that look beautiful on the surface, but contain a catastrophic fundamental flaw in the math.
And 2 months down the line, when you're running a critical medical simulation, your entire project just collapses.
Exactly. And Tang gives a very stark warning here. He says AI can make you incredibly lazy.
Oh, I can see that.
It's incredibly seductive to just look at a block of clean-looking code and blindly trust the output. But your core competency, your entire professional survival, now depends on your ability to audit, to verify, and to architect the systems the AI is building.
That distinction between writing and auditing is a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah.
It's not about doing the busy work, it's about steering the ship.
Steering the ship.
But to steer the ship effectively, you need to know where you are going, and you need a very specific kind of background. Tang's own career path is an absolute masterclass in how to navigate this changing landscape, and it directly challenges a lot of the viral advice floating around the internet today.
No, it really does.
We really need to dive into the myth of the zero-to-hero career pivot.
The internet ecosystem is absolutely flooded with these fairy tale narratives right now. If you open YouTube or TikTok, you're bombarded with videos and blog posts selling a very specific dream.
The 6-month bootcamp dream.
Exactly. The person with absolutely zero technical background, perhaps an arts major or a retail worker who barely uses a computer for more than browsing, who supposedly decides to learn to code, grinds through a bootcamp for 6 months, and magically lands a high-paying $250,000 job at Amazon, Google, or Meta as a senior software engineer.
And Tang tackles this myth head-on, and his perspective is bracingly grounded. Let's trace his actual documented journey, because it was absolutely not a blind, context-free leap into the dark.
Far from it.
He started early, participating in high school informatics competitions. He admits he didn't win major national awards, but that isn't the point.
The point is exposure.
Right. The point is that he was exposed to the fundamental logic and architecture of programming at a very young age. He built a mental framework for how computers think. Then, for his undergraduate degree at Xi'an Jiaotong University, he didn't major in computer science.
No, he majored in pure biotech and molecular biology.
And this is where a very specific, highly relatable anecdote comes in. Tang realized quite early in his undergrad that he absolutely loathed bench work.
And for those who might not be familiar with the day-to-day reality of a biology lab, bench work is the manual, often excruciatingly tedious physical labor of biology.
The grind.
It means standing at a lab bench with a pipette, meticulously transferring tiny amounts of liquid between hundreds of test tubes. It means managing cell cultures, which is essentially trying to keep microscopic organisms alive in a plastic dish, hoping they don't get contaminated by a stray speck of dust.
Just praying you don't sneeze on the petri dish.
Exactly. It involves waiting days for biological processes to happen, only to find out a slight temperature fluctuation ruined the entire experiment. Tang looked at that day-to-day reality, the physical grind of biology research, and knew, deep in his bones, that it was a profound waste of his specific talents, his analytical mind, and his time.
But I want to highlight what he didn't do, because it is the most important lesson here. He hated the lab work, but he didn't throw his hands up, abandon his entire undergraduate education in biology, and try to blindly compete with computer science majors from scratch.
He didn't zero-to-hero it?
He didn't try to become a zero-to-hero coder. That is the critical piece of advice Tang offers. He explicitly warns against that trendy blind leap. He states that maybe 1 in 100 people might possess the raw genius or the sheer brute force luck to succeed at a complete, context-free pivot into AI without any foundational background.
Instead of throwing away his biology knowledge, Tang analyzed his underlying skills and his existing mental models. He took inventory of his cognitive assets. He knew he had an underlying affinity for computational logic from his high school informatics days, and he now possessed a deep structural understanding of biological frameworks, cellular mechanisms, and medical theory from his undergrad.
So rather than starting over, he built a bridge. He transitioned into biostatistics for his master's degree. Let's pause and explain why biostatistics is such a brilliant strategic move. What exactly is it, and why does it serve as a bridge?
Biostatistics is essentially the mathematical translation layer between the squishy, unpredictable world of biology and the rigid, absolute world of computer science and mathematics.
I love that, the translation layer.
Biology is inherently messy. Cells act weirdly, patients react differently to the same drugs, genetic expressions fluctuate. Biostatistics is the rigorous application of statistical models to make sense of that biological chaos.
So it connects the two worlds perfectly.
By moving into biostatistics, Tang found the perfect intermediary step. It allowed him to take the biological context he already deeply understood and apply computational and statistical tools to it.
He wasn't just learning to code in a vacuum.
Right. He learned how to manipulate large data sets, how to run complex probability models, and how to use code to answer biological questions. He was writing code to solve problems, in a domain he had already mastered.
And he then used that powerful combined skill set as a launchpad to eventually land his highly competitive PhD position in artificial intelligence and computer science at the University of Vienna, focusing specifically on medical imaging.
It's the perfect stack.
If you're sitting at home right now listening to this, and you work in marketing or literature or supply chain logistics or history, you might feel like you're miles behind the AI curve. You might feel the urge to drop everything and just try to learn Python from scratch.
Don't do it.
Tang's journey proves why that is the wrong approach. Your current background, whatever it is your domain expertise. When you're looking to pivot or adapt to the AI revolution, your goal should never be to erase your past or compete with a 22-year-old computer science graduate on their own turf.
You can't beat them at their own game.
Your goal must be to layer AI proficiency on top of your existing highly specialized domain knowledge. Tang's unique massive value to the research community isn't just that he can code complex AI models.
No.
It's that he intimately, biologically understands the medical context of the data those models are processing.
You're building what we call a career stack. You're stacking your unique, perhaps seemingly unrelated skills together to create a profile that is impossible to replicate.
A completely unique moat.
An AI engineer is common, a molecular biologist is common, but an AI engineer who intuitively understands the biological mechanics of the retinal scans they're writing algorithms for, that is incredibly rare and immensely valuable.
Tang also touches on something really structural regarding the environments that actually foster this kind of cross-disciplinary growth. Because he studied in China, the US, and now Europe, he noted some very distinct differences in academic and research cultures.
And how they impact a student's ability to actually build that career stack. He observed a stark contrast in the systemic pipelines available to junior researchers.
What did he see in the US and Europe?
In the US and Europe, he noted that there is a very open, highly formalized, and deeply structured pipeline designed to bring undergraduates directly into the full life cycle of a research project. The system is intentionally built to take someone who is still living the ropes and plug them into real, consequential, well-funded work.
So they're treated as actual researchers from day one.
They're treated as junior members of a functioning laboratory. In contrast, while he found his professors during his undergrad in China to be incredibly supportive, deeply knowledgeable, and personally willing to help, the institutions themselves sometimes lacked that formalized, mature, systemic pathway.
It was more ad hoc.
It was harder for an undergraduate to easily integrate into ongoing, high-level research without taking massive personal initiative to break through the bureaucratic layers.
That observation highlights a harsh truth. The structure around you heavily dictates how quickly you can combine your skills and get your hands dirty with real-world problems. If the pipeline doesn't exist, you have to be wildly proactive about forging one yourself.
You have to build your own bridge.
Now, speaking of getting your hands dirty and forging your own path, we have to transition to the actual mechanics of how Tang consumes information. Because if you're going to pivot, if you're going to stack your skills, and if you're going to survive in a field like AI that moves at literally lightning speed, you have to learn how to read and absorb new info efficiently.
It's non-negotiable?
Tang has what I can only describe as a hacker's guide to reading academic papers, and it is ruthlessly, unapologetically pragmatic.
Ruthless is absolutely the correct term here. In traditional academia, there's often a deep, almost religious reverence for the literature. Researchers build massive, sprawling repositories of papers.
They read everything.
They spend weeks carefully reading the introductions, absorbing the historical context, analyzing the methodology, and appreciating the narrative arc the authors have constructed. Tang rejects that entire philosophy for his day-to-day workflow.
Completely throws it out.
His step-by-step breakdown is bracing. Step 1. He reads the abstract. He reads that short summary at the very beginning for one reason and one reason only, to answer a single binary question.
Do I care?
Exactly. Do I care about this specific topic? Does it directly impact my current problem? If the answer is yes, he does something that would give a traditional professor a heart attack. He does not read the introduction. He does not read the carefully crafted methodology section.
No way.
He skips immediately, bypassing pages of text straight to the results section.
I got to stop you there, because to a lot of people, that sounds entirely counterintuitive, almost negligent. Why on earth would a scientist skip the method? Isn't the method the entire point of a scientific paper, how they did it?
It seems negligent until you understand the brutal economics of attention in the AI field. Tang's logic is mathematically bulletproof. He skips to the results to see if the paper is actually quantifiably beating the state of the art.
So it's
Right. In the AI research community, they refer to this as SOTA. SOTA isn't a vague concept. It is usually a highly specific leaderboard. For any given task, say recognizing a tumor in a lung scan, there is an existing champion algorithm that has the highest accuracy rate. That is the state of the art.
the reigning heavyweight champion.
Tang goes straight to the results to check the new paper's baselines. Are these authors comparing their shiny new method against the actual reigning heavyweight SOTA methods out there? Or are they playing a very common academic trick where they compare their new method against weak, outdated baselines from 5 years ago just to make their own numbers look artificially impressive?
So he's instantly filtering out the academic fluff. He's looking for a genuine, undeniable breakthrough.
Exactly. If the results aren't genuinely superior and if they aren't rigorously tested against the absolute best existing models, Tang completely ignores the rest of the paper. It simply does not matter how beautiful their narrative story is. It doesn't matter how elegant, complex, or mathematically fascinating their proposed methodology sounds in theory. If it doesn't beat the champion in the ring, it is not worth his extremely limited time.
It's pure filter.
He treats academic papers not as sacred literature to be savored, but as a dense repository of experimental data to be aggressively mined. It's a purely technical extraction process. He views a published paper as a bold claim that must mathematically prove its worth in the first 30 seconds before it earns the right to his sustained attention.
That is a phenomenal heuristic for anyone dealing with information overload. Are you reading things just because they're well presented and sound smart, or are you ruthlessly evaluating their actual proven utility to your specific goals?
Right. What's the utility?
And to manage the tiny fraction of info that actually survives this brutal gauntlet, Tang keeps his toolset incredibly lean. He mentions using Obsidian, which is a very popular Markdown-based note-taking app, and Zotero, a reference management software for organizing his literature.
Very clean, very simple tools.
But he does not have a sprawling, unmanageable database of thousands of unread PDFs. Because he operates in a highly specific, targeted niche, he might only have a few dozen papers that are truly deeply relevant to his work at any given time.
He's entirely focused on the signal.
Right, completely tuning out the noise.
Oh.
He keeps a single, highly curated document with his personal observations, mapping out the connections between these elite papers. But that raises the next logical question. How does he use that tiny curated signal to actually generate a genuinely good, novel idea for his own PhD research?
This is where we get into the absolute alchemy of idea generation in high-level research. Tang outlines two main concepts. The first is a highly structured approach he calls the permutation and combination method.
Permutation and combination.
This is, frankly, the bread and butter of almost all technological innovation. You take a method or an architecture that has been proven to work brilliantly in one specific domain, and you boldly apply it to a completely new subject.
You just move it over.
Tang traces a fascinating historical lineage to illustrate this. Let's look at convolutional neural networks, or CNNs.
Let's do a quick deep dive on CNNs for the listener. What exactly is a convolutional neural network, in plain English?
Okay, imagine you're looking at a massive, incredibly detailed painting, but you are only allowed to look at it through a tiny 1-inch square magnifying glass.
Here, I'm picturing it.
You slide that magnifying glass across the top left corner, then move it slightly to the right, sliding it row by row across the entire canvas. As you do this, you aren't trying to understand the whole picture at once. You're just looking for tiny, specific features.
Like what?
First, you look for straight lines and sharp edges. Then, you combine those edges to recognize simple shapes, like circles or squares. Then you combine those shapes to recognize complex textures, like fur or metal. That sliding magnifying glass is essentially what a convolution is in a CNN. It scans an image pixel by pixel, layer by layer, building an understanding from simple edges up to complex objects.
So how does the permutation and combination method apply to that sliding magnifying glass?
Well, originally, researchers applied these CNNs to normal, everyday images to solve basic computer vision problems. They trained them to tell the difference between a picture of a cat, a dog, and a street sign.
Right, the classic AI tutorial stuff.
That was the first iteration. Then, someone had the combinatorial idea to apply that exact same CNN architecture to medical images. Suddenly, the CNN wasn't looking for cats. It was looking for anomalies in an X-ray.
Wow.
Then, the field specialized further, moving specifically to 3D CT scans or highly detailed MRIs. Then, Tang himself takes these established concepts and applies them to his hyper-specific niche, retinal OCT images, which are incredibly complex cross-sectional laser scans of the back of the human eye.
So he didn't invent the CNN. He just found a new, highly valuable place to aim it.
Precisely. And the cycle never stops. When a completely new underlying architecture emerges, like transformer models, which power things like ChatGPT, the entire cycle of permutation resets.
And just to clarify transformers, since we explained CNNs, transformers don't use that tiny sliding magnifying glass, right?
Correct. If a CNN is a sliding magnifying glass looking at small pieces one at a time, a transformer is like standing back and looking at the entire painting all at once, instantly understanding how the person in the foreground relates to the building in the background. It understands context globally.
So it sees the whole board.
Exactly. So when transformers proved they were better than CNNs at certain tasks, the whole research community rushed to apply transformers to cats and dogs, then to X-rays, then to MRIs, and finally to things like Tang's retinal scans.
Permutation and combination.
It is a brilliant way to realize that you do not always have to invent a completely new wheel. Sometimes true innovation is just being the very first person to figure out how to attach that existing wheel to a different kind of vehicle.
That makes the idea of innovation feel so much more accessible. But Tang notes that this permutation and combination method is really just the baseline level of idea generation. It's the standard playbook.
Right, it's just the start.
To do truly groundbreaking work, he introduces a second concept, which is where true mastery actually lies: deep domain accumulation.
Yes. To find truly valuable, paradigm-shifting ideas that go far beyond basic combinations, you need what Tang beautifully describes as a highly refined sense of smell.
A sense of smell.
You need deep, almost subconscious intuition. Artificial intelligence is famously known as a black box field. Because these neural networks have billions of parameters, it is often not mathematically obvious why one approach will yield a breakthrough and another seemingly identical approach will fail catastrophically.
The math is just too dense.
The math is too dense for a human to trace line by line, but an experienced researcher, someone who has accumulated massive amounts of deep domain knowledge, can look at a proposed new method, read the architecture, and instinctively know that won't work.
They just feel it.
They can't always prove it on a whiteboard in that exact moment, but their intuition is screaming at them. That professional intuition is born from the scar tissue of hundreds of failed experiments, thousands of hours of observing data behave strangely, and an intimate understanding of the domain's hidden quirks.
But developing that profound intuition takes an enormous amount of time. And I can imagine you sitting there thinking, how can I possibly accumulate deep, stable domain knowledge when AI changes every single week?
It feels impossible.
It feels like if you blink, you miss an entire new generation of models. The anxiety of information overload is so palpable right now. Every time you open Twitter or LinkedIn, there's a new model that supposedly changes everything.
Tang's advice on this specific anxiety is incredibly reassuring, and it really pulls back the curtain on how research actually works. He says, very bluntly, don't panic.
Don't panic.
The pacing of innovation might look like an absolute terrifying blur from the outside, fueled by tech press releases and social media hype, but the day-to-day grounded reality of actual scientific research is much, much slower and more deliberate.
How so?
He points out that you are not going to be scooped, meaning someone publishes your exact idea before you do just because a new model dropped 2 weeks ago. A solid, rigorously tested, peer-reviewed AI paper still takes 3 to 6 months of grueling human effort to produce.
The human element is still the bottleneck.
Exactly. The speed at which human beings can thoughtfully design experiments, clean messy data, validate results, and write comprehensive papers has not magically become instantaneous, regardless of how fast the AI itself can run.
He makes a great point that even if Google DeepMind or OpenAI drops a massive, world-changing new model right in the middle of your 6-month project, you don't have to throw your work in the trash. The shiny new model, no matter how powerful, does not instantly solve every obscure edge case or highly specific domain problem.
The foundations still matter.
The foundational gaps in the science still need to be filled. In fact, Tang points out that those old architectures we just talked about, like the CNNs, are still highly relevant and incredibly useful for a junior researcher or even for a business leader trying to build a practical, reliable AI tool for their company. Relying on a well-understood, heavily documented, older architecture is almost always far more useful and stable than betting your entire project on an unproven, brand-new framework that might be full of hidden flaws and lacks community support.
It's a phenomenal reminder that the bleeding edge isn't the only place where value is created. In fact, the bleeding edge is often the most dangerous, unstable place to build a practical system.
It's risky.
Massive, enduring value is created by reliably solving boring, persistent problems. And sometimes the old, boring tools are the most reliable way to do that. But to solve those problems, regardless of whether you use an old tool or a new one, you need raw material, you need data.
Yes, the data.
And this brings us to one of the most eye-opening, almost shocking parts of Tang's interview. If we connect his daily work to the bigger picture of medical research, there is a massive, pervasive illusion that we need to aggressively shatter right now.
Oh, absolutely. The great lie of clean data. Let's really dig into this because it completely changes how you view AI. When you're taking a university course or learning to code via online tutorials or competing in beginner machine learning competitions, the data sets you're handed are pristine.
They're perfect.
They are practically sterilized. They're neatly categorized in perfect spreadsheets, the image formatting is entirely uniform, and there are absolutely no missing values. It is a perfect, frictionless sandbox designed to make the algorithms look good.
But that's not reality.
Tang talks about the absolute shock, the professional whiplash, of transitioning from those perfect tutorial datasets to handling real-world clinical data pulled from actual functioning hospitals.
I really want to spend some time exploring exactly why real-world hospital data is pure, unadulterated chaos, because it's the fundamental bottleneck in modern medical AI. Let's imagine a highly realistic scenario.
Okay, paint the picture.
A patient lives in a rural area and goes to a small local clinic for an MRI. That clinic is operating on a tight budget, so they're using an MRI machine manufactured by Siemens that is 10 years old. Its magnetic field strength is 1.5 Tesla. The proprietary software on that specific machine saves the image in a highly specific digital format, let's call it a specific flavor of DICOM. The slice thickness, the physical distance between each layer of the image it captures, is set to 5 millimeters. 6 months later, that same patient is referred to a cutting-edge, multi-billion-dollar university research hospital in a major city. They get another MRI. But this hospital is using a brand new, state-of-the-art machine manufactured by GE Healthcare.
Completely different hardware.
It's a 3 Tesla machine, meaning the magnetic field is twice as strong, yielding a much higher resolution image. The slice thickness is set to 1 millimeter. The timing of the contrast dye injection is slightly different. The encoding format has newer metadata tags.
And both of those scans of the exact same patient look fundamentally different to a computer.
Completely different. To a human radiologist, a lung is a lung. The human brain naturally adjusts for the slight blurriness or the different contrast. But to an AI, which only sees raw mathematical pixel values, these two images might as well be from different planets.
That is wild.
Tang detailed how the image dimensions vary wildly, the encoding formats clash, and there are physical artifacts. Maybe the patient breathed during the rural scan, causing a blur, or maybe there's a tiny metallic artifact from a dental filling throwing off the magnetic field. There is missing metadata.
So the data is a mess.
Tang had a profound, career-defining realization. In the messy real world, the data is just as important, if not more important, than the methodology. You could possess the most brilliant, mathematically perfect, Nobel Prize-winning AI model in the world, but if you feed it this chaotic, mismatched hospital data, it will fail catastrophically.
It'll just break.
It will hallucinate tumors where there are none and ignore massive lesions because the pixel spacing was 0.5 millimeters off. He noted a terrifying reality. You can run the exact same brilliant method on just a slightly different random split of the same chaotic data set, and your accuracy results will inexplicably fluctuate by massive margins.
So what does this actually mean for the future of the field? It means the real, immediate frontier of AI isn't just sitting in a lab designing ever fancier algorithms. It's getting your hands incredibly dirty in the trenches of data management.
The unsexy work.
Tang calls these the unsexy but hypercritical frontiers. Everyone coming out of a computer science degree wants to design the next ChatGPT. They want the glory of the algorithmic breakthrough. But almost nobody wants to do the grueling, tedious, mind-numbing, low-level tasks. Meticulous quality inspection, manually repairing broken data files, and something called image registration.
Image registration is a perfect example of this unsexy, vital work. Let's explain what that is. Imagine you have 2 maps of the exact same city, but they were drawn by different cartographers at different scales, and one map is printed on a piece of translucent rubber that has been slightly stretched out of shape.
Okay, a stretched rubber map.
Image registration is the incredibly complex mathematical process of stretching, rotating, and aligning that rubber map so that every single street perfectly overlaps with the other map. In medicine, you're trying to perfectly align a CT scan taken in January with an MRI taken in June so the doctor can see exactly how a tumor has changed down to the millimeter.
It is.
Mathematically excruciating work.
But because so few people want to do it, because it lacks the glamour of building a new neural network, that is exactly where the immense, untapped value lies.
Yeah.
If you can master the messy reality of data pipelines, you become absolutely indispensable to any organization.
They're the one making it all actually work.
This data chaos also highlights a massive structural bottleneck in medical AI. We desperately need vastly more data to train these models to be robust against all these different machines in hospital environments. But medical data is, rightfully, highly restricted due to strict patient privacy laws like IPEA in the US or GDPR in Europe.
You can't just scrape the internet for it.
Exactly. And even if you get the data, labeling it requires incredibly expensive, highly specialized human doctors who just don't have time to sit and annotate thousands of images. This bottleneck leads us to what Tang considers a true holy grail in the AI field, the concept of AI generating its own synthetic medical data.
To understand why this is the holy grail, we need to compare it to an industry that has already solved this problem: autonomous vehicles.
Like self-driving cars.
Think about companies like Tesla or NVIDIA. When they're training the AI that drives a car, they face a similar data bottleneck. Driving a car around a real city for millions of miles to gather data is slow and dangerous. So they created a brilliant workaround. They don't just use real-world dashcam footage. They use highly sophisticated, simulated, video game-like environments to generate millions of miles of synthetic fake driving data.
Just build a matrix for the car.
Exactly. They can simulate rain, snow, pedestrians running to the street, all inside a computer.
And it works beautifully for cars, because the labels in a driving simulation are relatively simple and objective. The computer knows exactly where the stop sign is, because the computer put it there. The label's binary. Is this a stop sign? Yes. Is there a car in this lane? Yes.
But Tang points out why this exact same synthetic approach is exponentially harder, almost impossible right now in the field of medicine.
Why is it so much harder?
It's a problem of biological complexity. Generating a visually convincing fake CT scan or a fake MRI of a human lung is actually possible right now. We have AI art generators that can make incredibly realistic images. But a fake medical scan is completely, utterly useless for training a diagnostic AI unless it comes attached to hyper-precise, medically flawless labels.
Right, the AI needs to know what it's looking at.
You cannot just have an AI generate a picture that merely looks like a lung with a tumor. It needs a label that says, with absolute, unassailable clinical certainty, this specific irregular cluster of 400 pixels represents a stage 3 adenocarcinoma, and the surrounding tissue shows early signs of emphysema.
And the problem is, how do we prove the AI generated an accurate label? The structural details in a human body are so minute, so endlessly nuanced, that human radiologists require a decade of specialized medical training just to spot them consistently.
Well, we can't prove it yet.
If an AI generates a synthetic image, we currently have no mathematical or clinical way to prove the accompanying label is medically valid without having a human doctor verify it, which defeats the entire purpose of automating the generation in the first place. We simply can't do it. Not yet.
Tang makes a bold claim here. He says that if a researcher or a company can actually crack this problem, if someone can create an underlying AI architecture that generates truly accurate, flawlessly labeled synthetic medical images that perfectly mimic the physiological complexity of real human disease, it would be an epoch-making breakthrough.
It changes everything.
It would be a Nobel-level event. It would completely, instantly solve the massive bottleneck of data scarcity. It would eliminate the patient privacy hurdles because the data isn't from a real person. It would literally change the timeline of human medical research overnight, accelerating cures by decades.
It is a beautiful, sobering example of how the hardest problems in technology require us to understand not just the code, but the deep, unforgiving, chaotic complexity of the real physical world.
The physical world is messy.
And speaking of the real world, let's fast forward a bit. Let's assume we solved the data problem. What happens when these incredibly powerful, highly trained AI models actually make it out of the lab and into the local hospital? I pushed Tang on this because there's a very specific philosophical debate happening right now. I asked him, in the clinic of the future, will an AI sit next to your doctor, acting as a collaborative, equal peer? Will it be a joint consultation?
It's the classic sci-fi vision of the future, the brilliant robot doctor consulting alongside the wise human physician. Tang's answer to this vision is a hard, resounding, absolute no. The AI will not be a true collaborator. And his reasoning is a vital reality check that cuts through the Silicon Valley hype. His argument is grounded entirely in intractable legal, ethical, and compliance barriers.
I want to push back on that, though, just to explore the philosophy. If an AI system is statistically proven across millions of scans to be 30% more accurate at diagnosing early-stage cancer than the average human doctor, isn't it fundamentally unethical not to let the AI make the final collaborative call? Why let a less accurate human override the machine just because of bureaucracy?
It's a compelling ethical argument, but it shatters against the wall of legal reality. At its core, a deep learning AI, no matter how accurate, is fundamentally a black box.
That black box again.
We feed it data, it performs billions of mathematical calculations that no human brain can track, and it spits out an answer. We do not always know exactly how it arrived at its conclusion. We can't ask it to testify under oath and explain its clinical reasoning in a way that satisfies a medical board. Because of that inherent opacity, an AI entity cannot assume legal liability.
Oh, you cannot sue an algorithm for malpractice.
Precisely. If an AI collaborator and a human doctor review a patient's scans and they disagree on a critical cancer diagnosis, who takes the blame if the final decision is wrong and the patient is harmed? If the hospital sides with the AI and the AI is wrong, the hospital faces catastrophic liability. Therefore, Tang insists that AI must remain strictly legally defined as a tool, much like an advanced MRI machine or a highly sophisticated digital stethoscope. The human doctor must remain the absolute, final, undeniable decision-maker who carries the entire legal, ethical, and moral weight of the diagnosis.
Tang also points out the deeply sociological aspect of this dynamic. Put yourself in the shoes of the patient. Would you, sitting in a cold exam room, genuinely trust a joint AI-human consultation for a life-or-death issue?
Probably not.
If your trusted human doctor looks you in the eye and says you're perfectly fine, but a computer monitor on the desk beeps, flashes red, and says you need immediate invasive surgery, the psychological anxiety and the total collapse of trust in the medical process would be paralyzing. The AI has to stay in the background. It must act as a hyper-competent assistant, amplifying the doctor's efficiency and catching blind spots, but never publicly competing with their authority.
But how that invisible assistant actually functions, how the doctor interfaces with it, is undergoing a violent, rapid technical evolution right now. Tang brought up a fascinating convergence happening in the software world, the merging of agents and chatbots.
Let's clearly define the difference for the listener, because it explains where all software is heading.
Just a year ago, in the AI timeline, these were two completely different, isolated concepts. If you wanted an AI agent to perform a complex, multi-step, autonomous workflow, let's say you wanted it to automatically monitor a folder of incoming patient scans, identify the urgent ones, draft a preliminary diagnostic report, and securely email it to the on-call specialist, you had to use incredibly complex visual programming interfaces. Tang mentions tools with node setups, like Comfy UI.
We should explain what a node setup actually looks like, because it is notoriously unuser-friendly.
Think of a node interface, like a massive old-school digital switchboard. Instead of typing a simple sentence, your screen is filled with dozens of little boxes, or nodes. One box handles reading the image, one box handles analyzing the text, one box handles the email server.
Sounds complicated.
To make the AI work, you have to manually drag digital cables, connecting the output of one box to the input of the next, ensuring the data types perfectly match. It is highly technical, deeply visual, and incredibly clunky. A doctor does not have the time or the training to wire up a digital switchboard just to ask a question about an X-ray.
And a chatbot.
A chatbot, on the other hand, was simple. You typed a question, it typed an answer. But it couldn't do anything, couldn't send the email or monitor the folder.
But Tang points out that right now, in real time, those two distinct concepts are violently merging. The line is dissolving. He argues that if an AI system is truly intelligent, you should never need a complex dashboard of nodes and virtual wires to make it execute a multi-step task.
You should just talk to it.
It should just act exactly like a highly competent human assistant sitting in a chat box. You should be able to type in plain English, hey, keep an eye out for any urgent chest x-rays tonight, draft a quick summary if you see anything weird, and page me.
And it just does it.
The AI agent, operating behind that simple chat window, should be intelligent enough to dynamically wire up its own nodes, ask you clarifying questions if it needs to, figure out the specific workflow, and execute the steps seamlessly, all entirely hidden behind a natural conversation.
This convergence has massive billion-dollar implications for the technical path forward, especially in the medical sector. There are two fiercely competing philosophies in the industry right now. Approach A. Do you spend tens of millions of dollars building a highly specialized, highly rigid medical model entirely from scratch? One that knows absolutely everything about the mathematical structure of CT scans, but fundamentally lacks general intelligence, reasoning, and human communication skills. Or, approach B, do you take a massive, pre-existing, generally intelligent, large language model, like a hypothetical GPT Health, built on top of GPT-4, and carefully fine-tune it by feeding it massive amounts of specialized medical data?
Tang places his bet firmly, without hesitation, on the massive commercial success of Approach B. And his reasoning goes right back to the doctor in the clinic. A doctor doesn't want to use command line code or drag and drop nodes to interrogate a complex diagnostic tool. They want to talk to it. They want to argue with it.
They want a conversation.
They want that frictionless, natural, chatbot-style interface powered by incredibly complex agentic workflows humming silently in the background. It is entirely about reducing the cognitive friction between human intent and machine execution.
And reducing friction brings us to a deeply personal, crucial part of Tang's philosophy. This isn't just about reducing friction for machines, it's about reducing friction for human beings.
This is so important.
Navigating this hyper-accelerated world of AI, grinding through a demanding PhD, and trying to constantly learn new paradigms is an absolute recipe for severe, career-ending burnout. Tang's approach to surviving the daily grind is wildly unconventional, highly refreshing, and I think it's a message every single person listening to this desperately needs to absorb.
Oh, I completely agree. Let's delve into Tang's burst methodology for avoiding burnout. In a lot of high-pressure elite environments, whether it's Ivy League academia, Silicon Valley startups, or Wall Street, there is this pervasive, toxic hustle culture.
Oh, yeah.
Tang mentions a specific piece of Chinese internet slang that captures this perfectly, the Huan Wang. This roughly translates to the king of involution, or the ultimate workaholic. It describes the person who forces themselves into a rigid, punishing schedule of endless, visible productivity, competing in a race to the bottom of exhaustion.
Just burning themselves out.
Tang openly, cheerfully admits he is absolutely not that guy. And he strongly advises against trying to force yourself to be that guy, unless that relentless grind is truly your natural, effortless disposition.
Tang points out a fundamental, biologically grounded psychological truth that we often ignore in professional settings. Self-discipline actively depletes your limited energy reserves.
It takes fuel to be disciplined.
If you are constantly forcing yourself to adhere to a rigid, arbitrary schedule, battling your own natural circadian rhythms just to sit perfectly upright at a desk for 10 consecutive hours because that is what looks productive, you are burning massive amounts of cognitive fuel just managing your own behavior. You're spending your energy forcing yourself to stare at a screen. That leaves significantly less fuel in the tank for actual, complex, breakthrough problem solving.
He paints a scenario that is so visceral and relatable to anyone who does creative or technical work. He says it is completely perfectly normal to sit in your office, mindlessly scrolling on your phone for 2 straight hours because you have absolutely zero inspiration, zero focus, and your brain is just flat.
We all do it.
During those 2 hours, you feel immense guilt. You feel lazy. You feel like you're falling behind. But then suddenly, at 10:00 p.m., a spark hits. The internal rhythm aligns. Problem clicks in your head, and you aggressively, fluidly write brilliant, flawless code for 4 hours straight, accomplishing more than you did in the previous 3 days combined.
Tang's core advice is to stop fighting that natural oscillation. Go with your natural rhythm. Do not rush the periods of latency. And perhaps most importantly, if you have the agency to do so, find a boss, a laboratory, or a corporate workplace culture that fundamentally respects that rhythm, rather than a culture that measures your intrinsic worth by how many continuous hours you look busy sitting in an ergonomic chair.
It is a profound, necessary rejection of industrial-era, factory-line productivity metrics being forcefully applied to modern knowledge work. You simply cannot treat a human brain exploring the unseen frontiers of artificial intelligence like a factory-line worker repetitively assembling widgets.
It just doesn't work.
High-level innovation happens in unpredictable bursts. And what is so fascinating about Tang is that when he is in one of those high-energy bursts, he isn't just grinding on his required PhD medical research. He pursues passion side projects, and one side project in particular blew my mind because it perfectly tangibly illustrates the rapid democratization of this incredibly powerful technology.
Yes, let's talk about the 4090 side project. Tang casually drops into the interview that, in his spare time, he's building a fully localized conversational AI voice companion. And here is the kicker. He is running it entirely on his personal computer, specifically on a single consumer-grade NVIDIA RTX 4090 graphics card.
I really want to break down exactly what that means technologically and socially because it is massive. When we use tools like ChatGPT or Claude, we are not running that AI on our phones or laptops. We are sending a signal across the internet to a massive multi-billion-dollar server farm owned by a mega corporation consuming incredible amounts of electricity, and they send the answer back.
It's all in the cloud.
But Tang isn't pinging the cloud. He has built an entire self-contained ecosystem with 3 distinct local components. He has a local speech recognition model to hear his voice and transcribe it. He has a local text large language model to process the thought and generate a highly intelligent response. And he's a local speech generation model to actually talk back to him in a natural voice. All of this complex machinery is running entirely offline, processing in real time on a metal box, sitting quietly under his bedroom desk.
The societal significance of this cannot be overstated. We've been conditioned over the past 2 years to think of advanced reasoning AI as a monopoly tightly held by a few tech giants in Silicon Valley. But Tang's 4090 project proves that consumer-grade hardware is rapidly, exponentially reaching the point where you can possess a highly responsive, deeply intelligent, conversational AI companion running entirely offline.
It's yours.
It is absolutely private. Your data never leaves your room. It is fully yours to control, tweak, and customize without censorship or corporate guardrails. You do not need a $20 monthly subscription to a tech giant to access the bleeding edge of intellectual thought partnership. It represents a radical, impending decentralization of intellectual power.
It's absolutely wild to think about the implications of that kind of localized power, and leads perfectly into Tang's final resounding piece of advice for you, the listener. It genuinely does not matter if you're a tenured PhD student, a mid-level marketing executive, a supply chain manager, or an undergraduate arts major. You absolutely must embrace AI right now.
You have to.
Tang frames this not as a neat little productivity trick, but as a massive, impending societal information gap. Your personal proficiency with these tools will directly, irrevocably determine your future income, your career trajectory, and your economic relevance over the next decade.
Tang uses a brilliant analogy here to explain how to actually achieve that proficiency. Let's really explore this. He compares learning to use AI to the journey of becoming a master photographer.
I love this analogy. Let's trace the history of it. In the early days of photography, you had to understand the deep chemistry of film. You had to know exactly how silver halides reacted to light, how to manage the temperature of the developer fluid in a darkroom. It was highly technical, much like the early days of coding where you had to know the exact syntax of a programming language. If you made a mistake, the photo was ruined and it cost you time and money.
Exactly. But today, digital cameras and smartphones handle all that foundational chemistry and light balancing automatically. Anyone can take a perfectly exposed digital photo, just like anyone today can type a basic prompt into ChatGPT and get a perfectly spelled paragraph. The baseline of execution is now free and abundant. But, and this is the crucial point, taking a masterpiece photograph, a photo that wins a Pulitzer Prize or captures a profound human emotion, still requires an immense, highly refined intuition. You need an intuitive eye for composition, for the decisive moment, for the emotional weight of lighting.
And how do you build that intuition? You can read all the theoretical textbooks you want about the rule of thirds or the golden ratio, but a master photographer's true skill is built almost entirely on their shutter count. The raw, sheer volume of how many tens of thousands of photos they have actually taken. You have to take 10,000 bad photos to build the subconscious intuition required to take one masterpiece.
Tang applies this exact same logic to AI. He says that building true, valuable intuition in the age of AI requires consuming GPU hours. You You have to use the tools constantly, obsessively, daily. You cannot just read articles about AI. You have to actively interrogate it.
Get your hands dirty.
You have to ask it complex questions, force it to write code, ask it to analyze your marketing strategy, and most importantly, you have to watch closely how it fails. You have to learn the specific ways it hallucinates. You have to learn how to intuitively adjust your prompt to guide it back on track. You have to put in the raw, messy hours of actual interaction to build the subconscious architectural intuition required to survive and thrive amidst the massive economic and sociological shifts that are inevitably coming in the next 10 to 30 years.
Consuming GPU hours, putting the reps in, building your shutter count. It is the only way forward. So let's bring all of these disparate threads together. We have covered an incredible, expansive amount of ground today. We started with the sheer existential relief and the accompanying crisis of having AI obliterate the tedious line-by-line grunt work of coding, permanently shifting the high-value human skill from being a scavenger of syntax to a director of logic. We thoroughly debunked the dangerous myth of the blind zero-to-hero career pivot, learning from Tang's journey through biostatistics that you must strategically stack your new AI skills onto your existing hard-won domain expertise rather than throwing your past away.
We learned his ruthless, pragmatic, and highly efficient approach to reading academic research, skipping the narrative story entirely and demanding to see the hard results against the state-of-the-art baselines. We explored the absolute necessity of accumulating deep, subconscious domain intuition to sniff out bad ideas in a black box field.
The sense of smell.
We peered deeply into the messy, chaotic reality of real-world medical data, realizing that the unsexy, grueling work of data repair and image registration is where the real, immediate value lies. And we engaged in the philosophical and legal realities of why the AI in the clinic of the future will be a spectacularly powerful tool, but never a legally liable, independent collaborator.
And finally, we learned to forgive ourselves for our natural, oscillating working rhythms, actively embracing the burst methodology to avoid the toxic trap of hustle culture burnout. All while recognizing that the sheer world-altering power of AI is rapidly becoming localized and democratized, sitting right there on a desktop GPU under a student's desk. Your specific background, your current job, your unique perspective, no matter how utterly unrelated to computer science it might seem right now, is your absolute secret weapon in this new economy. But it is only a weapon if you combine it with the courage to start consuming those GPU hours and intimately embracing the tools today.
And if we look just slightly forward, building directly on the implications of Tang's local 4090 AI voice companion, we arrive at a truly provocative, almost unsettling reality. Think deeply about that highly intelligent AI running quietly on a hard drive in a bedroom, totally offline, utterly private, completely untethered from corporate oversight.
It's a crazy thought.
As these local, hyper-intelligent models become increasingly sophisticated, eventually becoming entirely indistinguishable from deep, empathetic human conversation, it raises a profound sociological question that we, as a species, haven't even begun to answer yet.
When every single person has unrestricted access to a completely private, brilliant, and infinitely patient AI confidant, an entity that never judges you, never tires of your complaints, perfectly anticipates your moods, and never ever forgets a single minute detail about your life, how will our very definition of human isolation and conversely human connection fundamentally change? Will we actively seek out the friction, the unpredictability, and the beautiful messiness of real human relationships even more, craving the authenticity of imperfection? Or will we slowly, comfortably retreat into the perfect, flawlessly tailored, frictionless understanding of our private silicon companions? It is a heavy, fascinating thought for you to mull over the next time you open a chat window and say hello to the machine. That is all for this deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us on this expansive journey, and we will catch you next time.